Okay, for my project, I had ascending the stairs. So we have him starting here, and you see you have hip flexion, knee flexion, and the ankle is in a little bit of plantar flexion. So I'm going to start with the hip. The muscles that are working for hip flexion are the iliopsoas, the quads, sartorius, gracilis, tensor fasciae latae, and pectineus, and these are concentrically contracting to move that hip into flexion, and he needs about 67 degrees range of motion to be able to go up the stairs. And while these are contracting, the iliopsoas and the quads are going to be the main hip flexors that are working. The other ones are assisting. So moving on to the knee. For knee flexion, he is going to need about 83 to 105 degrees range of motion to go up the stairs. You have the hamstrings, sartorius, gracilis, gastroc, and popliteus working. And at the very beginning of his knee flexion, back here, the very beginning of that, the popliteus and the gastroc are going to be the ones that are working mainly to unlock that knee to go into flexion. And then the gracilis and the gastroc are going to contribute to all angles of his knee flexion there. And the knee flexors are passively working due to active hip flexion. So I'm going to go back a little bit. Talking about his ankle as he gets it up into the air. Like I said, he started with plantar flexion to push off the ground, but as he gets it up into the air, he has some dorsiflexion here for his foot to be able to clear the stairs. And for dorsiflexion, he needs 14 to 27 degrees range of motion. And the muscles that are working are the tibialis anterior, extensor hallucis longus, extensor digitorum longus, and peroneus. But the tibialis anterior and the extensor hallucis longus are the main two dorsiflexors that are working. And these are concentrically contracting for him to be able to lift his foot up to clear that step. So then as he goes on to this step, he's landing on his dorsiflexors, but as his body leans forward here, he's going into plantar flexion. And for plantar flexion, he's going to need 23 to 30 degrees. The muscles that are working are tibialis posterior, flexor digitorum longus, gastroc, and soleus, and these are going to be concentrically contracting while the dorsiflexors eccentrically control that motion. And as he goes up on this step, his plantar flexors are working, and then he moves back a little into dorsiflexion. It's just a little tiny bit. And then his ankle will just go to neutral once he gets all the way up on the stairs. And while these plantar flexors are working, the tibialis anterior is the main one that's going to be controlling with dorsiflexion. So then as he's up on the stairs, he has knee extension and hip extension as well. So for knee extension, he's going to need full knee extension or almost nearly all the way full knee extension to be able to go up the stairs correctly. And the muscles that are working are rectus femoris in the quads, and these are concentrically contracting, bringing that knee back into extension, but you have the knee flexors eccentrically controlling it. So you have the hamstrings eccentrically controlling that motion. And then talking about hip extension as well, his hip is just going to return back to neutral or zero. And the muscles that are working are the glute max, hamstrings, and adductor magnus. These are concentrically working. And the hamstrings are what initiate bringing that back into hip extension. The glute max helps more of the end range and going into hyperextension, and the adductor magnus works from 90 degrees to 0 degrees of hip flexion. Okay, I'm going to be measuring his active and passive range of motion for hip flexion and knee flexion. Then I'm also going to manual muscle test hip flexion and knee flexion. So we'll start out with active range of motion for his hip flexion, and I'm going to have the axis of the goniometer on the greater trochanter of his hip, and then the stationary arm will be in line with his body, and the movable arm will be in line with his femur. And obviously I would have him on like a flat table and a table that was long enough, but this is all I got. So For active range of motion, I'm going to have you bend your knee and then bring your hip all the way up as far as you can with your knee bent. Okay. So for his active range of motion hip flexion, he got 111. So I'll do passive range of motion now. So I'm going to do this for you. You can just relax and let me do it. And I'll be applying a slight overpressure at the top for his full reading. So for his passive range of motion, I got 131. So quite a bit of difference there. And then we'll do knee flexion as well. Can you like scooch up a little bit so you can get your knees a little better? So for knee flexion, I'll have the axis of the goniometer on the lateral epicondyle, and the stationary arm will be in line with his femur, and the movable arm will be in line with his fibula. So I'm going to do active range of motion, so if you can just bend your knee as far as you can. Okay. So his knee flexion was 121. And then I'll do it for you this time. And then for passive, he got 134. So a good increase there as well. So now I'm gonna manual muscle test his knee flexion, so I'll have you roll onto your stomach. And to test his knee flexion, I'm going to move his knee into about half of his range of motion, and I'm going to be pulling back on your leg, and then I want you to resist that way until let me pull you. Okay, go. So his knee flexion is a 5 out of 5. And then for hip flexion, can you sit up? So for his hip flexion, I would take him to about half of his range of motion again. So about right here, and I'm going to be pulling you down, and you resist up and don't let me pull your leg down. So his hip flexion is a 5 out of 5 as well.